This is Thursday night, November 8th, 2016, and we're graciously allowed to be in the home of Mrs. Sandra Norman. And Mrs. Norman, we usually start out with a few who you are type questions, biographical.
Okay.
And I was wondering if you could give me your full maiden name.
Sandra Lee, L-E-A, Robb.
Okay. L-E-A. Okay, Sandra.
Because at one time, living on the other edge of Apple Creek were two old aunts whose names were Lee and Lou.
Oh, okay.
The one that was blind
Okay.
is the one I got named for.
And then yours.
And then my sister Linda has the middle name Lou.
Okay. How many sisters did you have then?
I have two sisters.
Two sisters? And what are their names, just for...
Linda, Lou,
Lily.
Robb Smith.
Okay. Is she older or younger?
They're all younger.
Younger, so you were the oldest of the
But
family.
they all have gray hair.
Oh, okay. Well, that's... You have something on them then.
Yeah.
And what is your other sister's name?
And my other sister is Barbara Jean Robb Hofstetter.
H-O-F?
Hofstetter.
Okay.
And I have one brother.
And one brother, okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Richard
Oh, that's
William
right.
Robb.
You showed me the picture, and that's right. Richard William Robb. Mm-hmm. And all are still living?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
I'm amazed because my parents died. Mom had just turned 61, and my dad, well, actually, he died first. He was 62. 7 months later, she died.
Oh my! And any idea as to what the cause of death
Mom
was?
had a heart problem.
Okay.
Dad, actually, he'd had, well, let's say he was a truck driver for many, many years,
Mm-hmm.
which means he didn't get a lot of exercise.
Mm-hmm. And you said he drove milk truck then?
Well,
Or-
early, and then he drove for Smuckers then for
Oh,
30
okay.
some years.
Okay.
He retired from Smuckers,
Okay. Well, very good.
and 6 months later died.
Oh, geez. You hear stories about that.
Yeah.
People retire and then...
So
That's
yeah,
what it is,
so all of us kids have outlived them. I mean, age-wise,
Mm-hmm.
none of them ever lived in. My youngest sister is 68 now.
Mm-hmm. Which brings me to, when were you born?
January 15th, 1941, before the war.
Ah, okay. 1941. January 15th.
Martin Luther King.
Oh, okay. All right. And you were born where?
I think I lived in Apple Creek, but I may have lived on the south end of Worcester. I'm not positive on that.
Mhm.
I know I was born in Kenny Memorial Hospital, which was in Worcester,
Okay.
which no longer exists.
Mm-hmm.
And they must have torn it down within a year or so after I was born, because my sister Linda was 22 months younger than I am, and that hospital didn't exist when she was born. So.
I've seen a postcard somewhere along the way of another hospital in Worcester, so I know what you're talking about,
Yeah.
but I didn't know much about the...
Well,
the
there used to
history.
be what was called Beeson Clinic, which later became that rest home, the Horn Nursing Home.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That was a clinic then. Okay.
And actually, my youngest sister, Jean, was born in the current hospital.
Oh, okay. So that's how old that is then.
Yeah.
And I remember how
Well, then,
old the original part was.
where Beth's Western Motel is,
Downtown, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
that was the Worcester Community Hospital,
Oh,
because that's where my grandpa died.
okay. All
He
right.
was only 47 when he died.
Oh, boy. All right.
But see, Worcester used to have a paint factory,
Okay.
and so that's what, that and scarlet fever.
Okay.
You know,
So
that-
the fumes of the paint factory
Yeah.
is what took or hurt a lot
Yeah.
of the people then. Okay.
Yeah, because his youngest daughter was 6 years old. No, Shirley was 8 at the time. I was 6. I was born on her second birthday.
Okay. On whose second birthday?
my mom's youngest sister's
mom's-
second.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
there was 16 years
Okay.
difference between them.
Well, that's kind of a nice little tie to have with somebody there.
Yeah,
What's your address here? Just
8785 Emerson Road.
8785 Emerson. Okay. Alrighty. Okay. So, you may have been born in Worcester, but yet your earliest memories, are they of Apple Creek?
Yeah.
Okay. And tell me about some of your early memories of Apple Creek.
Evidently, behind that house in Apple Creek,
Beside Maddox's.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there was like a sawmill.
Okay.
Okay. I had this extremely curly hair.
Okay.
But I would get away from Mom, and I would go back and jump in
The sawdust
the
pile?
sawdust piles.
Okay.
So I would come with all this hair, and she...
Was she a patient mother?
I don't think so, because you realize she was just 18 when I was born.
Mm-hmm.
And then 22 months later, she had Linda, and then another 15 months, and she had Dick.
She was a busy mother.
And then there's my dad off World War II, you know.
Okay.
And so I was the one who was left to go to the store to get milk and bread and whatever, because she didn't drive at that time.
Mhm.
And I don't think we had an extra car or anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Yateses upstairs, he was kind of the man of the house that looked after
Mm-hmm.
things that needed to be done. So Mom would just send me. Back then, I think you had a charge account
Mm-hmm.
that probably went monthly, and I can't find it, but I did. I used to have my ration book.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Mm-hmm.
I may have loaned it to one of my nephews when he was doing a thing for school or something, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where it got to.
And you said the Yateses was, you think might have been Larry Yates's relative?
Yeah, I'm
Yateses
pretty
then?
sure that it was his uncle.
Mhm.
Um,
Did you know Mary Eicher?
the name is familiar, yeah.
Okay, she was a Yates also.
Oh,
And I
okay.
don't know if that was the same. Now, she would have been older. And they used to have Yates Meat Market, which used to be where the wooden nickel was, or right in there. So I'm not sure. I never asked.
That's another story.
Okay, good. You go for it.
My grandparents,
Hmm.
the Bonhams, my mom's parents,
Okay.
at one time ran the wooden nickel.
Oh,
This
really?
was before World War II,
Okay. Uh-huh.
for some short time.
And what was their names?
Bonham.
First name?
Mary
last name? Mary.
and
Okay.
Clarence.
Okay. And they ran. So it was there probably already.
Yeah,
And was it called the Wooden Nickel? Or
I have no idea.
okay.
I think at that time they lived upstairs above.
It seems like there was apartments up there.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think they lived there, and that must have been when my mom was in high school. I mean, my mom and my Uncle Bill both graduated from East Union High School, or whatever.
Which would be
Yeah, the school.
Apple Creek School. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And that's why I actually found, there was a lot of old things. I actually found, and my dad had gone to school there at one time too, when he
Mhm.
was junior high age or something. I think his father had died when he was only about 13 years old, but then
Okay.
he was the youngest of 9 kids.
Mm-hmm.
But, okay, where was I?
We were talking.
Okay.
We were talking the Wooden Nickel,
Yeah.
and we were talking Bonhams, and then we were talking Apple Creek High School, and you said your mom graduated.
Yeah, she went to school
and
there.
your dad went there for possibly a little bit. Did you say?
A little bit in junior high.
In junior
yeah.
high, then. Okay.
Yeah, and of course then my cousins, the Imans
Yes.
and the Marthys.
Okay. Is there
Other
a tie
than-
between the Imans and Marthys, or are they just kind
Yeah.
of different side of
Their
the
mothers
family?
were sisters.
Oh. Okay.
My dad's 2 sisters.
Okay.
See, and Irma Marthy died. Did you ever know? Well, when did you guys come to?
We were in Apple Creek from 60 to 62, and then we moved
Okay.
away, and then came back in 66.
Well, see, like my one cousin, Larry Marthy, would have been the last one to graduate from the East Union thing because his sister Roberta graduated in 56, from here, the new school.
Okay.
And then Butch graduated in '60.
Okay. Now Paul would be. Is that which Martha is Paul?
They're all cousins.
They're all cousins. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
the whole flock of them.
And Mrs. Marthy, the school bus driver, who was she married to then?
That's a different Marthy family.
Different Marthy. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah. No. Paul's dad was part of the clan. I forget how many. And Bob Marthy
Got
that
Bob,
lives
yeah. Oh,
right
yeah.
over there. And then they had what? How many boys? And
4. Dave, Dan, Pat, and then Mike.
yeah, and then
And
one,
Karen,
and yeah, one girl. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can remember that. Well, because at one time,
I'm sure you can
that
remember
house,
those.
that house where they lived,
Okay.
Merle and Irma and the kids, they lived in that house.
Okay. And that was their farm then, right there, I suppose.
Yeah,
then,
because we would go there and go wading in the creek, and there was a pond, but I didn't know how to swim, so we stayed out of the pond.
Okay.
But yeah, I remember, and that's what they had a TV.
Oh, okay.
See, we didn't have a TV.
Now this would be in the 50s, early 50s?
Yeah, the early 50s.
Okay.
Yeah.
TV was pretty cool then.
So, a lot of times on Sundays, by then we were living west of Worcester. And so Sunday afternoon, my dad we would drive over here and visit my cousins and watch Super Circus on TV.
What was Super Circus?
You're too young.
I'm too young for Super Circus.
Super Circus had Mary Hartline, and I forget the other guy's name, but it was on every Sunday night, and they did these little acts and stuff.
So it was like a circus show that was on TV?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Once a week.
Okay.
So we
Very
would
good.
come and see that.
All right.
I can remember when the double highway was built up here.
Okay. From
Okay.
East Union on to
Yeah.
east. Uh-huh.
Because, see, we lived on Route 30 west of Worcester.
Okay.
The original
Right.
Route 30.
West of Jefferson even, or how far west?
In between Jefferson and Reedsburg.
Okay.
We moved out there just before I started first grade, so in 1947.
Okay.
When my dad got out of the Army, and we bought a house out there. And I remember one Sunday, Dad said, "I'm going to take you to see this new road." It's the first time we'd ever seen a split highway.
Oh, okay.
So we came over to see
It
that.
was an event then.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm kind of a car geek. Do you remember what kind of car your father had back then? Or?
No, but I used to have a car like one of yours that you like.
Oh, did you?
I had
Okay.
a Corvair.
Oh, did you really? Okay. All right.
That was one of my early cars when I was first teaching.
Okay.
Dad probably had an old Ford or an old Dodge, like 1940 something, 48, 49, something like that. I know my mother did not learn to drive then. It wasn't until I was probably in 5th or 6th grade before she finally learned to drive and worked in Worcester. At one time, Mom was the head of the Montgomery Ward catalog store.
Oh,
She
okay.
was supervisor of that. So
Very good.
yeah,
All right. Let's go back down to Apple Creek as a little
back
girl.
to Apple Creek.
When you went to the grocery store, what was your grocery store?
Well, was it Amstutz? Is that
Okay.
who had the?
I remember Vic's or, but
Yeah.
I don't know if Vic's was, all along or
I'm
if it-
trying to think of it.
You
I
remember
know I went to the drugstore.
Okay.
The Carson drugstore.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me about Jeff Carson's drugstore.
I remember one time I saw a doll, and I decided I needed that doll.
Oh, okay.
So I took her home.
Mom found out.
Mom saw that doll, and I took her back.
Okay. Just
But
borrowed
the thing
it.
that used to scare me then was, see, I had to cross a railroad track.
Yeah. Okay.
And back then the train was still running. I would stand for the longest time.
Would you just to make sure both ways were clear then?
looking back and forth and back and forth, and finally running across the tracks. And it was only one track, I think.
Did it have lights or this was just, you
No.
just hear the horn and...
You either, yeah, you saw the train or you didn't,
Okay.
yeah.
Uh-huh. Do
It's
you remember
def-
much about the trains? Like, were they still steam engines then, or had they
Have
converted?
no idea.
Okay.
All
They
I
were
know is I just wanted to
big and
be away from
fast
them. I
and-
wasn't,
Okay.
yeah, I wasn't gonna be close to a train.
Any,
And I never took my brother or sister with me. It was always, I was always sent by myself to do this.
any impressions of
And I
Jeff
could have
Carson?
only been maybe 4 years old.
That's pretty young.
Tops 4.
Yeah.
Well, let's see who, we don't.
Okay. You remember what now?
I remember going down to the creek
Behind your house where
Yeah.
you lived there? Okay.
and skimming stones
Oh, okay. All
in
right.
the creek.
Mm-hmm.
So I must not have gone there by myself. I think maybe
Yeah, somebody
my
was with you to
mom
watch you.
or
Okay.
somebody would take me there. Yeah.
Any memories specifically of Jeff Carson himself, or just that one time?
No.
They remember being there
I
at
have
the store.
no.
And
And I remember going to Dr. Mayer.
tell me about Dr. Mayer.
You know, whenever we were sick, that's where Mom would take us. Yeah.
Mhm.
Although he's not the person, he wasn't the doctor that delivered me.
Okay.
There was a doctor named Dr. Ganyard, I think is who's on my birth certificate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was in Worcester.
Okay.
So maybe my grandparents, my mom's parents lived in Worcester at the time.
Okay. Do you remember? You shouldn't remember, but there was a couple barber shops downtown. Or do you remember the telephone office? They used to talk about being able to walk by, and one of the Imans was an operator. Now this may be in the 50s as opposed to the 40s. Or is there any other stores downtown that kind of jog your mind?
You know, when I started teaching in Apple Creek, there were still stores besides the hardware and the.
Mm-hmm.
There used to be a little. Wasn't there another bar
Yes.
by the bank?
The Big Apple. Yep.
Whatever. I remember. I remember that later on.
Mhm.
Actually, when I first came here to teach,
Mm-hmm.
Bessie Richardson and
Mhm.
Lulabelle Bott
Mhm.
were working in the kitchen. They knew immediately who I was
Okay.
from when I was a child.
Okay.
Of course, I didn't. And I think Lulabelle may have been in my mother's class.
Mm-hmm.
I know that Neil Maurer,
Mm-hmm.
that had the funeral home
Mhm.
in Worcester, was in my mom's class.
Was she? Or he, I mean? Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
because she always talked up. And
Okay.
so,
How about across the street from you? Do you remember Lee Bolt's garage or gas station?
is that who had that? I see. We would have had no reason to go because we didn't have a car.
Right. I just didn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I think gas stations now, it was a place to pick up things too. But back then, it was probably just get your car fixed and get gas. So.
Yeah,
Okay.
because later didn't Pepler's?
Yeah, Pep had one down there across from the bank, and he made and so there was Lee Bolt's for a while where BP or is now.
See, I remember down on the other corner, wasn't that a car garage?
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Doty's or something like, or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about way down there
Way down.
by Troyer. There was one right there.
Yeah.
I have seen a
that,
picture
that
there.
was a car dealership
Okay.
there.
Yeah. Okay.
I can remember that.
Okay.
I did know how to get to my grandparents' house. They lived on Sylvan Road.
Mm-hmm.
So, once my dad, I guess, well, it would have had to been. I don't think he was in the Army all that long because there were already 3 of us kids.
So,
So
you were
I
born in
think he-
41.
Yeah.
So,
So
he,
I think he didn't go in till 44.
did he get drafted, I guess, then?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know where he went? Or
Yes, I did.
Okay.
He went to the Philippines because I told everybody that my dad's in Manila
Okay. All
or
right.
Vanilla
Or
whatever.
vanilla.
I
Okay.
told- you know.
Okay.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I do have. I have some pictures of my dad in the Army. So I think that once the war was over, I think those guys were sent home
Mm-hmm.
because, well, like I say, by 1947, we moved west of Worcester.
Mhm.
So how much time he was home before that, I don't know. See, at first, there used to be in Worcester a place called BF Transfer,
Okay.
and that's who my dad worked for before he worked for Smuckers.
I can't imagine how strong your dad must have been, because those old semi trucks wouldn't have had power steering, and they would have had to have been.
My dad was about 5'4".
Oh, was he? He still probably had arms like
Yeah, well,
rocks,
I
though.
had more belly than
Was he?
arms, but
Okay.
yeah. So, yeah, I remember one time we had a player piano because some lady, it was in her attic, and she told my dad, if you can get it out of there, it's yours.
Okay.
So we got a player piano.
Okay.
We later donated it to the church to use for Sunday school.
Okay.
But we had the rollers.
I bet that was unique. Did it work then?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Mhm.
Yeah, it worked. But that's when we were in Orrville.
Okay.
So I went through, I went to Chester Elementary.
Mhm.
And that was before Northwestern was finally built when I was in 5th grade.
Okay.
So I had these great teachers and stuff there. And what's funny is, years later after I retired from teaching and was subbing,
Mhm.
50 years after I had started there as a 1st grader, I went there to sub one day.
Did you? I bet that was.
And it hadn't changed.
It hadn't. Okay.
It is no wonder they decided to get rid of it.
Okay.
But back then, we all got our lunches, in the cafeteria,
Mhm.
and it was 50 cents a week.
Oh my.
That's
Okay.
what it cost.
And it's probably pretty pricey too.
And every afternoon, whenever they had leftover sandwiches or bread and butter or anything like that, they would bring them to 1st graders first and 2nd grade and so on, and pass them out to the kids,
Mhm.
so that there were
That was
never
nice.
any leftovers.
And then well, you were probably told to bring them home anyway, right? I mean, as in, if you weren't hungry, were you
No,
still?
no, you
Okay,
got them.
you had to
and
eat
you
them.
were hungry. You ate.
You
them.
were hungry. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Dean Chance was in my class.
Oh, was he? Okay. All right. What's your memories of Dean?
He wasn't the brightest.
That's a good thing you could throw a baseball in, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can remember throwing snowballs with him. You know?
Okay. All right.
But yeah, no, he never could have gone to college. I mean, it was a good thing he could throw a baseball because he made it.
Was he
Well,
alive?
and Mary Sue Zanson was in my class
Really?
in
Okay.
elementary school, yeah,
All right.
and stuff. So-
Another Apple Creek teacher went to Chester, and that was Mrs. Sells. Only that would have been
Well,
a
she must have
a
been
few
there
years,
before.
few years earlier.
because she was still subbing when I came to Apple Creek to teach. So
Yeah.
yeah, she was quite a lady.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I think my mom and my dad remembered
Okay.
and stuff.
I bet so.
Yeah.
Going back to grade school, then what type of playground games did you do with the kids?
Well, in the wintertime, I can remember we'd make snow angels all the time.
Okay.
And we were allowed to wear, back then we didn't have many clothes. I didn't realize that we were poor, It just, because,
Coming out of the war, everybody was probably about that. way.
yeah. And so I remember that we had pea coats to wear.
Mhm.
And you would get maybe one new blouse a year is all I had. And a lot of times we were allowed to wear corduroy pants
Mhm.
out there. A lot of the schools where you couldn't, but you could there. And so I would have little corduroys and a t-shirt.
Mhm.
That's the way. I can remember one boy in my class that wore the same outfit every day of the year. And it was always clean and stuff, so his
Mhm.
mother evidently washed it every night,
Okay.
When we first moved out west of Worcester, we didn't have a bathroom in the house.
Okay.
We had to go to the outhouse
Okay.
quite a ways from the house.
Mm-hmm.
And then my dad, because there was no septic system, and I don't think we had water, and well, I think there was a pump in the house. And I remember my dad and my uncles digging the septic thing
Mm-hmm.
and taking a part of this big kitchen and putting in a bathroom after we'd been there a year.
Mm-hmm.
But that got cold.
I bet that was very appreciated.
Although I think there was a little washroom off of our porch, and we would take baths in big tubs.
Mm-hmm.
My dad would heat the water and carry it out there and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
Well, one time the screen door was hooked.
Oh.
Dad scalded himself.
Oh no, we
with this water.
bumped into it. Oh no.
It's
Okay.
like, I remember that.
Wow.
And I remember my sister Linda, the one next in age to me, one time Dick comes running in the house, just screaming and screaming, and Mom's checking him all over, trying to find out, what's wrong? Well, here Linda had, you had the wringer washer.
Mm-hmm.
She put her arm up,
Mm.
and it
She sucked it all the way in. Oh
sucked
no.
her. So she's
Okay.
hanging out
Yeah.
there in the washer,
Oh no. Okay.
Didn't break a bone
Okay.
and stuff, but,
Probably bruised pretty good though.
I don't know.
Left an impression.
We did, yeah. We had 13 acres out there.
Mm-hmm.
Half of it, a farm,
Mm-hmm.
put a field in. But we had all this orchard.
Now, were you renting, or did your father own that?
We
outfit?
owned that house.
Mhm. Okay.
And actually now that house is burned down. The people that lived across the road from us, he worked for what we would call OARDC now, but back then he raised turkeys and different things. So they're the first people who gave me books to read.
Okay.
Because when I started to school, I knew nothing. I had never seen my name written, nothing. I have every one of my report cards from first grade
Do you
up
really?
through 12th.
Okay.
So it didn't take me long once I went to school that, I started out, I think, with a C in one thing, By the end of the year, I was like all A's,
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing I loved most was reading and, being in school and stuff. My third grade teacher, actually I had the same teacher in third grade and fifth grade, Mrs. Layton, whose husband, Layton School in Worcester,
Oh, really?
was named for.
Okay.
And she and her husband evidently had traveled a lot. So I really got this interest in geography and stuff because she would always tell us about the places she'd been and whatever. By the time I was in fifth grade, she was like the principal, because by then Northwestern was built. She was the principal of Chester.
Mm-hmm.
So she taught half a day, and then we had Mrs. Gortner the other half of the day. I remember,
Mm-hmm.
and then back then we used to have what was called May Day.
Mm-hmm.
We'd have the whole school, every class learned to sing certain songs, and they had little dances, and this was when the high school kids, we were still all together,
Mm-hmm.
but it was a big deal at the end of the year. I remember that. Then, when I was in sixth grade, first part of March, my mom, they thought I had the flu. I was all puffed up, whatever, And so finally, Mom and Dad, they took me into the doctor in Worcester. And instantly they put me over in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And it came to be that I had, well, I'm beginning to doubt now, but they called it a kidney disease.
Mm-hmm.
I spent 29 days in Worcester Hospital,
Oh my golly.
never getting out of the bed.
Okay.
So I missed March, April, May of school that year.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons for this, we now think relates way back to when I was 12.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctors here think that they said, I bet you had rheumatic fever,
Mm-hmm.
because they found scar tissue on my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And because they said oftentimes the kidney thing was a result of the rheumatic fever.
Mm-hmm.
But there's nobody alive that can verify that anymore. So we're just guessing. That's why.
Did you feel sick, or were you
Well,
just
at
puffed?
that time, I was blown up like a balloon. I was
So you knew something was wrong with you, definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, I
everybody
spent
did.
all that time, yeah.
I was just wondering how you felt individually. I mean, like you
And
weren't
then
allowed.
they had me like on, well, like I didn't see my brother and sisters that whole time I was in the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
because they weren't allowed.
Weren't allowed in.
They were too young, you know. But I was on, I can remember the diet. Everything had to be, well, I couldn't have any salt.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was salt-free, fat-free. So the meat had to be ground up and boiled. Have you ever had liver ground up and boiled
That doesn't sound very
with
good.
no salt or anything on it, you know? So mainly I could have chicken done that way,
Mm-hmm.
and this liver and stuff. And so once I got home from the hospital, I had a tutor who came. I almost remember that lady's name, but she lived in Jefferson. No, she didn't. She lived in Reedsburg. She'd come to my house, and that lasted about a week. And the doctor said, evidently, I was getting worse. I'm gonna get some water.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
My grandma and my Aunt Shirley were living with us by then.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I always liked school a lot more than Aunt Shirley did. And even though she was 2 years older than I was, I could do everything better than she could.
Okay.
But she didn't always. Well, although she died several years ago when she was very young. So we really stayed kind of close all those years, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But she was kind of spoiled being born, you know, 16 years after my mother and 14 years after her brother, you know, so.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, after my grandpa had died, Grandma couldn't afford. Back then, Social Security was just starting.
Mm-hmm.
She got $15 a month for her and $15 for Shirley.
Mm-hmm.
So she couldn't afford to live on her own
Mhm.
anyway, because there was no money. So they lived with us there, and were still with us when we moved to Orrville. Once Dad got the job driving for Smuckers,
Mm-hmm.
that summer between my 6th grade and 7th grade, we moved to Orrville.
Mhm.
He bought a big house. We had 4 bedrooms and all this stuff, you know,
In town.
in town, right on Hall Street.
Mm-hmm.
And I was restricted from any PE classes for 2 years when I was in junior high.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when the kids are learning to play volleyball. And of course, a lot of this stuff didn't exist. So, I mean, I just never got an interest
Mm-hmm.
in taking part in sports because I wasn't allowed to do it
Mm-hmm.
for so long. So
Was there a point in time where you were totally released then? I mean, after that 2
after
years?
that point, yeah.
Okay.
So I did take a couple years of gym class in high school, you know.
But yet your interests were all
My interests were
focused already then, or
Yeah.
set in stone, or
because, well, and another reason my back is thing is all those months I spent in bed, because that's 6 months.
yeah.
I would sit, because we didn't have a hospital bed, you just had, you know. So I would sit like this.
Mm-hmm.
I was either reading or I was drawing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of put that, you know,
Yeah.
and that just hasn't helped
Mm-hmm.
with this now.
Okay.
So when I was about 14, my dad decided that I was going to wear a brace on my
Okay.
back.
All right.
Well, I was pretty shy. And there was no way I was going to go into the locker room, before gym class and let anybody see this
Mm-hmm.
strapped thing on my back. So I took it off. And I ran away.
Mm-hmm.
By then my grandmother had her own apartment. I ran as far as grandma's house.
Mm-hmm. What then?
And then I graduated at Orrville,
Okay. All right. Class of.
1959.
Okay. All right.
We still get together all the time.
Do you? Okay.
Yes.
So you and Ron Dobson were about the same age then, I guess.
Yeah, we are. Of course, he was here and
Right.
yeah, I
And you
was-
were at Orrville.
yeah.
Okay.
So then I went, I don't know why, but my parents didn't think that I could do anything else, like work in a factory or be a secretary or any of those things,
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted to, be reading and drawing. And so they finally, in my senior year, they said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I want to go to college. Because I knew then I wanted to be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So they finally went to a meeting at the school. And we decided that Kent State at the time was the most reasonable priced one. So they signed me up to go to college.
Okay.
So
So.
I went to Kent State.
Okay.
And then when I came out of there, my first teaching job was in Parma.
Did you have an elementary education degree?
Yeah.
Or okay. All right.
Yeah, I majored mainly with 4th through, actually my certificate was always 1 through 8,
Mm-hmm.
but I concentrated mainly 4th, 5th, and 6th,
Mm-hmm.
That's what I wanted to do, so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So your first teaching job was in Parma then? Okay.
Yeah, John Muir Elementary.
Okay.
John Muir Elementary, well, we had 4 classes at every grade level.
Mm-hmm.
So my first year, I had a 6th grade accelerated class. Well, at that time, you weren't teaching anything about accelerated kids in college. But the 5th grade teacher there happened to marry the 6th grade teacher, so they wouldn't let them teach in the same,
Okay.
they were across the hall from me. So like 2 weeks before school was to start, I got notified that we're changing you because we're sending her to where you were supposed to be. So you're here. Well, back then, since they really didn't know a whole lot about, these kids, that 5th grade teacher had put them through all the 6th grade material.
Okay.
So here I am with 32 kids, IQs ranging from 132 to 164.
Okay. Coming in cold.
Yeah, it's like I had to dream up everything. And at that time they had what was called airborne TV.
Okay.
This school was built backwards.
Okay.
Where it faced, there was supposed to have been a road go through there.
Okay.
It never did. So
Okay.
the front of the building faced the woods.
Okay.
So which meant, and it was on like the farthest northeast in Parma.
Okay.
And then you were into Cleveland,
Mm-hmm.
And so I was required to turn on the TV to this Spanish program a couple times a week. It never came, either you were looking at snow or you weren't, and I'd tell the principal, Mr. Fortelka, we're not seeing anything. We're wasting all this time every week. Well, he was in charge of it.
Oh.
Let's say I stayed in Parma 1 year.
The wasting was not the right word then.
And I went to Strongsville.
Okay.
And I liked Strongsville.
Did you?
That
Uh-huh.
was pretty good.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I go through Strongsville 3 times a week, so know where you're at.
I was right off where it crosses there, just a little ways down. It was Helen Muraski Elementary School.
Okay.
And back when the tornado went through Strongsville,
Didn't know that. Okay.
oh yeah, it was like the second year I was teaching, probably 65. And it wiped out, there was a nice housing development back of it where part of our students came from. And it killed some people in that development.
Mm-hmm.
But then it went on, and your main road through Strongsville, where the Catholic Church was, there was a Catholic church and Catholic school.
Okay.
And it wiped out the Catholic school.
Oh boy.
So, at that time, there were only maybe 4 elementary schools in Strongsville. And so, every school, we took in a class. So, like, what used to be our gym and place where the cafeteria, we took in a 3rd grade class
Gotcha.
from the Catholic school.
Mm-hmm.
They were there now, so
Mhm.
our kids had to eat,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Oh.
and stuff.
Based on Holy Week and things like that, then yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So, in fact, the Zander family, he used to be the Lutheran minister.
Up here
In
on
Orrville.
East. Oh, in Orrville. Okay.
Yeah. Well, at that time, I had a son in my class in Strongsville, and they were just leaving. I remember parent-teacher conference, he says, well, we're going to be moving soon, you know. Oh, where are you moving? Orrville. I went, that's my church, my home church, you know.
Oh.
So it was kind of neat, so.
Mhm. So from Strongsville, where did you go then?
So from Strongsville, then I decided to go, went to Columbus, but I
Okay.
taught in Marysville.
Okay.
And I taught in a junior high school.
Mm-hmm.
I always loved geography and stuff. They had this opening. So I went there. And after the first year, they were going to be starting a special ed class. Because they had never had that before. Well, I guess they didn't exist anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But anyhow, because I was the only teacher that had an elementary education, they decided they wanted me to start this class, and they sent me to Ohio State that summer for a recertification and stuff in special ed.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Did it go well then, or?
here I was with a class of kids that the one girl met her boyfriend and they went to his apartment
Uh-oh.
every lunchtime. I called in the mother. I was told to mind my own business. You know, so all these kids, there were no books or anything at that time. So I was having to make up everything. Well, by then I was married and Jim was getting drafted.
Mm-hmm.
And so he says, I don't want you staying in Columbus. So that's when I came back to Wayne County.
Okay.
And I took the job at Fredericksburg. There
Okay.
were, I mean, the day I interviewed, it was like, do you want 4th grade, 5th grade, or 6th grade?
So you were
You know,
hired, and
it was
you
like,
have a choice.
okay, right there.
So
Sandra Boston too.
Okay.
You know, Sandra took 4th grade, I took 5th grade.